Well, back in the US, Joe Biden is marking 1 year since he became president of the United States. At a news conference, Biden fielded questions about the setbacks he's encountered, with key parts of his agenda blocked by both Republican lawmakers and also holdouts in his own Democratic Party. But he also defended his achievements so far.
It's been a year of challenges, but it's also been a year of enormous progress. We went from 2 million people being vaccinated at the moment I was sworn in to 210 million Americans being fully vaccinated today. We created 6 million new jobs, more jobs in 1 year than any time before.
Now, DW's Washington bureau chief Ines Paul has this report on the highs and lows of the first 12 months of the Biden administration.
I, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr., do solemnly swear.
1 year ago, large parts of the Western world breathed a sigh of relief. Not so much because of the new occupant of the White House, President Joe Biden, a long-term figure in Washington with almost a half a century of policy-making experience, but because they hoped that the chaotic chapter that was the Donald Trump experiment would soon be at an end. David Marinis is an award-winning journalist and a presidential biographer.
He was clearly the right person for the job a year ago. He was probably the one Democrat who could get elected and stop the Trump descendants. But now, a year later, there are real questions about that, about whether he's the right person for the next 3 years.
To start with the positives. In his first year in office, President Biden was able to push a $1 trillion infrastructure package through Congress, a feat that no president had been able to accomplish in 60 years. But its impact won't be felt for a long time, and people might not reward him with their vote in 2024. What they do feel immediately are the increasing prices for basic goods. Inflation has risen at its fastest pace in nearly 4 decades, pushing prices up at a 7% annual rate. For the international community, the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan raised many questions, especially about how closely the new White House is really willing to work together with its NATO partners.
1, 2, 3.
Like most parts of the world, dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic is a major challenge. With midterm elections coming up in November, Biden is in danger of losing his razor-thin majority in the Senate and in the House. Biden has to walk a fine line between protecting the American people and scaring or ignoring the concerns of possible voters.
Mr. President.
With his approval rating at an all-time low, with 65% of Americans believing his presidency is a failure, what could the next steps be?
It requires more than just Joe Biden. It requires the entire Democratic Party to get its act together, which it hasn't been able to do in this last year. And getting some luck on the pandemic. I mean, some of it is beyond his control.
Even one of the most powerful politicians in the world faces severe limits to pushing through his agenda.
Now let's bring in US policy analyst Liz Schulke. Liz, according to polls, Biden's approval rating after 1 year in office is among the worst of any US president. Why is he so unpopular?
That's a really good question. I think part of it has been this lingering pandemic. We heard, coming in here, that people all over the world, but especially in America, are just tired of what they feel like is a pandemic that just won't end. There's also some issues that are being pinned on Biden that aren't necessarily solely his responsibility. For example, rising inflation that hurts families' ability to put food on the table. But as we know, folks in Europe are feeling the same pressures. And finally, that, as we've discussed, that messy withdrawal from Afghanistan, it still really lingers in the psyche of, is he capable to do the job that we need him to do?
So Biden was elected on a promise to heal a deeply divided country. Has he managed to do that?
That's a huge factor behind why even his poll numbers are so low. Gallup just released a poll that said it is a historic polarization in America. As we know, there was just the 1 year anniversary of the January 6th insurrection. So I think, no, unfortunately, America is in a place that is more divided than ever, and this division and this polarization is absolutely driving the dissatisfaction in Biden's performance.
But there are midterm elections coming up this year. Can Biden turn this around?
Absolutely. There were just a bunch of special elections at the start of the year where Democrats had a very strong performance. Also, as we always know, a congressman can separate himself or herself from the national conversation and say, okay, things in Washington may not be working, but look what I brought home to you today. For example, with the infrastructure bill passing, a lot of representatives can go to their hometowns and say, I am bringing real dollars to our community to fix real problems. However, the Democrats have to be very concerned and put together a very, very strong push going into November.
U.S. policy analyst Liz Schulke joining us there. Thank you, Liz.